Thank you.
Love it. I mean, we would not be doing this prize now, and I think it's a great X Prize if Fairfax had not stepped up. I have a question for you. We have 50 governors in the United States. How many of them actually have a doctorate? Any idea? There's one. There's one. It's a great honor for me to introduce someone who I'm inspired by him, who he represents. Dr. Ricardo Rosselló is the governor of Puerto Rico. He's the youngest governor in this nation at age 39. He's a fellow MIT grad. He has a PhD in bioengineering and is really the only governor who is a scientist by trade. He was directly affected by the major disaster of Hurricane Maria, and so he speaks to these things from the heart. Please help me in welcoming a great man who gives me inspiration about our potential future, Governor Ricardo Rosselló.
Thank you, Peter.
The stage is yours, sir.
Thank you.
It's dangerous giving a politician the microphone.
I know. Those 10 minutes are quite challenging for me. but thank you. I've never gotten that great of a presentation, so thank you, Peter. Peter was mentioning that I am a scientist. I was a scientist in a previous lifetime. Then I got a little bit dumber, so I got into politics. And, but I got into politics because I wanted to use the scientific framework to see how we could solve problems. Originally Puerto Rico, and just to give you a brief background, as I came to the administration, we were marred with fiscal chaos, economic distress. So many of our efforts were geared in that direction. Of course, we wanted to make reforms, but we did not expect, and I think this is one of the critical components of my conversation, that we were going to encounter natural devastation like we did. So about 8.5 months into my administration, not one, but 2 hurricanes hit the whole of Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico has been a place that always has encountered challenges with hurricanes and weather events. And it's also on the fault line of potentially catastrophic earthquakes. So what X Prize is doing over here is really near and dear to our hearts and to my heart, because predicting these natural disasters is a critical component in the aftermath process of the recovery, of the rebuild, and in the emergency. Having the capability of predicting will let the population know what's coming. It will allow us to prepare better, and therefore the emergency process can be shorter. The recovery process can be speedier, and then we can get back to rebuilding. If you don't have these mechanisms, picture what happened to Puerto Rico. September 6th, we got hit by the first hurricane, Hurricane Irma. It just skidded off the northern side of the island, Category 4, and we were recovering from that hurricane. Fast forward a couple of weeks as we were recovering, we see a small storm that's forming and coming towards Puerto Rico, but it was just that. It was a small tropical storm. 36 hours later, in an unprecedented speed, it went from a tropical storm to a Category 4, Category 5 hurricane. And this is one of the important things to note. While you see all of these trajectories that news channels put about the hurricanes, where they're going, the truth of the science is that we've gotten better in predicting the trajectory, but we've actually gotten worse in predicting the intensity of these events. So that is why this is important. In this context, in the moment that we live in with global climate change, islands like Puerto Rico are going to feel the heaviest brunt of it. We are the future of global climate change, we are what your jurisdictions will be in the next 10 or 15 years. Because our islands are so small, we don't have that big of a footprint in terms of the impact on global climate change, but we feel the hardest hit from it. Therefore, we're going to get more hurricanes, more thunderstorms, catastrophic weather events, droughts, as we did in 2014 and 2015. And of course, just last week, we commemorated the 100th year of the last major earthquake in Puerto Rico. So we're at the expectation of waiting for that. So the challenges in Puerto Rico are plentiful. And if you see why we need to change this, envision this relatively small island where 61% of our population lives in the coastline, where most of our critical infrastructure is there as well, where people still have not engaged in a curriculum of preparing for these devastations, where we need and have needs to safeguard some of our water reservoirs, where we need to have stronger building codes for our island, and where we need to prepare for devastating events such as this. So today, I'm here a year after a storm, still in the recovery phase, and hoping to get into the rebuild phase, which will be exciting, and I'll talk about it, about Puerto Rico and how it's going towards the future. But we're still in that recovery phase. Imagine if we could have predicted much earlier on that this Category 4 hurricane was going to devastate the whole of the island. Imagine that. We wouldn't have had, perhaps, the extensive loss of life, the limitations with healthcare that we encountered. So this X prize is critical for that. And in the overall discussion of preparedness now in Puerto Rico, my goal is to not just make it a hurricane-centric discussion, but to make it a natural disaster-centric discussion. My goal is to make sure that all of the resources that are coming to Puerto Rico right now are not only used to better prepare for hurricanes, but also for the eventual reality of an earthquake, and so that we can be more resilient. Truth of the matter is that the climate change has put us in a very challenging position, but I think it is also an opportunity, and this is why our government is making a pledge. The Puerto Rico pledge, so that we can battle and global climate change, and that we can have better preparedness, is as follows. Number one, we aim to reach 100% renewables in energy by 2050. And we aim to get to 40% by 2025. Number two, we're going to use 100% of our CapEx money in our budget, capital expenditures, 100% in the next 10 years, solely for resiliency. And number three, we're going to make sure that we start a reforestation process so that we can battle erosion, the higher temperatures that are ongoing in Puerto Rico. Number four, we're going to invest in works that are going to be done in coral reefs, in our beaches, in our dunes, everywhere across our island, so that we're better prepared. Number five, we are going to make sure that we have capacity building so that our society is prepared to respond to these challenges, whether it's K to 12, so that we can have a curriculum that's specific to mitigation, to resiliency, to response, or whether it's our labor force, so that they can be better prepared for the challenges that are coming up ahead. Those are some of the pledges that we are making, because we believe that after this main challenge, after this devastation, we have the opportunity to make Puerto Rico into a very unique spot. I want to share a vision of how I see Puerto Rico in the future. I see Puerto Rico as a connector of the Americas, because we're part of the United States, but we're also culturally connected to the Latin Americas. We are the perfect spot, the perfect meeting place for business, for diplomacy, and for other ventures. I see Puerto Rico as a place that's open for business, that we can develop ideas. And after the devastation, I see Puerto Rico as the platform for innovation, and particularly innovation in resiliency. So I am calling upon all of the innovators in this room to see Puerto Rico. There's going to be a lot of funding that's going to go towards rebuilding our island. But we don't just want to rebuild it back to code. We want to rebuild it better than ever before. As I told you before, Puerto Rico is facing some of the challenges that your jurisdictions are going to be facing in the next 10 years. What better place, what better ground zero to test those innovations and to make sure that once global climate change happens elsewhere in the world, we are prepared for it. And lastly, I want to see Puerto Rico as the destination of the human cloud, where as jobs become geographically independent, we can call upon anybody in the world to come to Puerto Rico and give their service elsewhere. So in order to do that, we need to rebuild. We need to do it better. But more importantly, we need to be prepared for the next storms to come. So making sure we have policy to be resilient is important, but the innovations and the innovators that are working towards predicting earthquakes and the intensity of hurricanes are critical for jurisdictions such as ourselves. And I want to thank all of the innovators here at XPRIZE for their leadership and commitment. If we do this together, I am convinced that Puerto Rico is going to be the island of the future, the connector, and a platform for innovation for years to come. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
And I have to say, you ended exactly on 10 minutes.
I was afraid of you.
It was perfect. It was like
it was completely on fear basis.
Amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. Wow.